for a closer look at the Swiss vote and its broader ramifications, we're joined by Peter Mandeville, an associate professor at George Mason University and the co-director of the school's Center for Global Studies. And he joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Many people were surprised by this vote. Should they have been?
I don't think that they should have been surprised seeing this coming out of Europe, given that there's been a growing trend in recent years that suggests an increased unease among Europeans towards Muslims living in that continent. It's a bit surprising, I think, to see it coming out of Switzerland, a country that historically has been so well known for religious pluralism and tolerance.
And this vote seems to reflect, as you say, a growing Islamophobia in Europe. I mean, talk a little bit about that. What exactly is at the root cause of it?
Well, this is a trend that we've been seeing expressed in public opinion polls, for example, over the last 6 years or so. And it dates back to, I think, a series of events driven by, for example, the Madrid bombings of 2004, the London tube attacks of 2005, the killing of the Dutch filmmaker Theo van Gogh shortly thereafter. And these events have kind of been part and parcel of a growing sense of concern around Muslims in Europe. But this is not anything new. There have been elements of sort of turbulence in the relationship between Europe and its Muslim populations dating back to the 1980s. But this has really been ratcheted up of late, I think, as those concerns relating to social integration, for example, have come to been compounded by wider fears about growing radicalization and Muslims as a potential security threat.
And is this fear irrational or is it rational?
Well, it's irrational in the sense that a lot of this concern seems to stem from fear of Islamic extremism, although much of the events around which this debate has been taking place haven't related directly to Islamic extremism. So, for example, we've had the controversy around the ban of the headscarf in public schools in France, the Danish cartoon crisis, and these events have certainly highlighted the fact that there are cultural differences between Muslims and non-Muslims in Europe. But what we seem to have seen, I think, is a conflation of concerns about Islamic extremism, a phenomenon that's really confined to a very distinct minority of Muslims in Europe, a conflation of concern with Islamic extremism and radicalization with Islam and Muslims as a whole.
And just very briefly, far-right politicians in other countries such as the Netherlands and Denmark have called for similar referendums in their countries. Are we likely to see more measures like this on the ballot?
Well, unfortunately, I think one of the byproducts of these recent events is that it has given a political space for figures from the center-right to, in some cases, quite far-right political parties to have a voice and to be taken seriously where, say, some 10 years ago, they wouldn't have. The most well-known case, of course, is that of the Dutch politician Geert Wilders and his anti-Islamic film Fitna. So I would not be surprised at all to see a number of right-wing parties making political hay of this in the coming months.
Okay, Peter Mandeville, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.